On behalf of Accepted.com, I want to welcome all of you today to the MBA 2012 Start Your Engines webinar given by Linda Abraham, where you'll learn the 7 steps you should be taking now to prepare for your 2012 MBA application. Now, Linda Abraham is Accepted.com's founder and president. She's helped thousands of MBA applicants gain acceptance to top programs including Harvard, Stanford, Wharton, London Business School, NYU, and many more. In addition to advising clients and managing Accepted.com, she has written and lectured extensively on admissions. Now, before we begin, I just want to point out 2 features that we'll be using during the webinar. The first is your question window located on your dashboard. Your dashboard is on the top right side of your screen, and at the bottom of that box is a place to enter questions. If you've minimized the window, you may need to click on the small blue-green arrow on the top right to re-expand it. Additionally, on the top left side of your dashboard, there's a button with a little hand in a blue circle with a green arrow. That's how you raise your hand if you click on that button. So if Linda asks you to raise your hand, just click on that button over there. We have set aside some time at the end for Q&A. So if you have any questions during the webinar, you can enter them into the little question window, and we'll do our best to get to them at the end. And also, make sure you're there. Don't miss out, because at the end of the webinar, Linda will be presenting an exclusive offer to webinar participants. So make sure you're there. Without further ado, MBA 2012 Start Your Engines with Linda Abraham.
Thank you very much, Miriam. Thank you very much to all applicants who've joined us today or this morning on the West Coast, which is where I am. I really appreciate you coming. This webinar, the genesis of this webinar, comes from 2 seedlings, if you will. One is my frustration with applicants who start the process quite late, and usually 2 weeks before they want to submit an application. And therefore, they shortchange their chances of acceptance at dream schools, at the schools they really want to attend. I realize it's somewhat ironic, and that I'm preaching to the converted by telling you that this is one of the reasons for this webinar, because you're here. But I hope that you'll also tell your friends who are planning to apply to later watch the recording of the webinar, or just to get themselves going on the application process. The other source for this webinar is, after 15 years in the MBA admissions business, I've seen and heard a lot of advice, much of it good, some of it not so good, but I've also seen use of imagery and metaphors that on some level are misleading and on another level are somewhat limiting. And I want to spend the next 40 minutes giving you some straight talk. I can't promise that it will be image-free or metaphor-free, because it won't, but just straight talk on the MBA application process. So let's go through some of the more common metaphors and see what you think about them. One, and this is how Derek Bolton, the head of admissions at Stanford Graduate School of Business, likes to refer to the MBA application process. He feels it's an accounting exercise, an opportunity for you to take stock of where you're at and where you want to go. Others say, especially some of my consulting, admissions consulting colleagues, say it's all about personal branding. It's all about being an excellent performer and then presenting that excellence. And still others say it's all about marketing. It's about spin. It's about how you present yourself. Not so much your visual logo, but your printed logo, the sound bite, the elevator pitch. I'd like to hear from you. How do you feel? How would you characterize the MBA application process? So Miriam's going to post a poll now asking you to kind of rate these options and a couple others. How would you best describe the MBA application process? All right, another few seconds. Only 43% of you, now we're over half. Can the rest of you vote, please? And then we'll close the poll. 75%, another 5 seconds to vote. Okay, let's close the poll now. We have over 80% having voted. And you want to show the results, Miriam? There we go. So 11% felt that the application process is an accounting exercise, 50% felt it was about personal branding, 34% identified it as a marketing effort, none of you said that it was none of the above, and 32% said it was all of the above. I'm firmly in the last camp. It's a little bit of all the above. And while I believe that metaphors and similes can be useful, I also believe that they have been abused in the MBA admissions process and to a certain extent obscure the process and maybe limit your perspective of the process. I believe it's an accounting exercise. I believe it is about personal brand and the best things that you've done. And it also is about presenting yourself most effectively. And that's, of course, much of what marketing is. So, again, the next 40 minutes, 35 minutes will be devoted to providing you with straight talk on what you should be doing now for the next 5 to 8 months before you submit your applications so that you can maximize your chances of acceptance at top MBA programs when you apply in round 1 or round 2 of the 2011-2012 application season. So that's part of the reason for the, as I said, the second seed for the webinar. The first seed, as I mentioned, is just the stress junkies among you, those who wait the last minute, either out of choice or just because life and work and everything else intervened. I really want to urge you to get going either independently or with us as early as possible. My staff and I are constantly frustrated by the people who come to us at the last minute. And yes, we will happily edit your essays when you come to us 2, 3 weeks, even 1 week before they're due. We'll do our best. As long as we have availability, we'll do our best for you. But sometimes we do run out of availability. We don't have staff available, so that's one risk. But the more important risk, the one I'm really focusing on here, is that we can do so much more than polish and edit essays if you start early. And we can really advise you, and again, that's part of what this webinar is about what you can do to improve your profile. Now, it's now May. You have either until October or perhaps until January if you want to have, we're not going to discuss third round applications, that's a whole separate section, to work on your application. But the first thing you have to do, and the thing you should be doing now, is laying a good foundation for that application. And again, I'd like to take another quick poll and ask you, actually I don't want to do this in a poll. I want you to answer it in the question window. What do you feel is a good foundation for an MBA application? Given that we're in May, actually it would be at any time. What is the foundation for a good application? But now is the time when you have time to work on it. Okay, somebody doesn't have a clue. Have a solid plan from Martin. A GMAT. Okay, Rajesh says, ready with GMAT, target schools and career goals. Solid GMATs come up again, a couple of years of work experience. GMAT, TOEFL. Somebody wishes me a happy belated birthday. Thank you very much. Target recommendations. Time and project management skills, that's one. Okay, leadership, good. Understand why you want to do the MBA. Chris, I think you nailed it. Send that gentleman a free ebook. Chris, Miriam will be in touch with you. Okay? I think Chris is, thank you all for your suggestions. I would say that most of you, when you're talking about GMAT, TOEFL, grades, work experience, identifying your strengths, which is also pretty good, I think those are more the framework of a good application if I'm going to continue with my structure metaphor. I think the foundation for a good MBA application is your goals. It's your post-MBA goals. Know why you want to do what you want to do with your MBA. Know why you want an MBA. Chris, where are you? Chris Asper, where is it? Understand why you want to do the MBA. That's exactly it. What do you hope to get out of it? Where do you hope to be when you finish the degree? Begin with the end in mind, as Stephen Covey says in 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. So what is a good MBA goal? What does this foundation consist of? since it's not going to consist of cement and rebar. It's going to consist of an industry and a functional focus. What do you want to do after your MBA? And again, the focus is on action, not study. It's something you want to do, not something you want to study. It's the ideal job right after you get your degree, and maybe for the first 5 years after your degree. There can also be a long-term element to it, an aspiration or a dream that perhaps applies more than 5 years, 10, 15, maybe even 20 years after you get your degree. And it could be that your long-term goal could be a way of contributing to the betterment of society or in some way on some larger scale. It could be moving up the corporate ladder. It could be starting your own business. There could be many different things that you would like to do in the long term. And it's okay to be a little fuzzier in the long term. That's just fine. The long-term goal is also a little bit less critical from an admissions perspective. If you have something like this, you don't have to hide it. You should be prepared to discuss it. And indeed, for some schools, it may actually be what they require. So how do you determine a good MBA goal? What if you're working away as a software programmer, as a consultant, as a business analyst, and you know you want an MBA, and you're not quite sure why? It's kind of like the next thing to do. Well, there are a lot of applicants like that, and I would say you need to clarify your MBA goal, your post-MBA goal. And the best way to do that is, first of all, to examine what you like and what you're good at. And then talk to people. Talk to people who are in positions that you find attractive, who are a little bit older than you, perhaps 5 to 10 years older than you, who are a few years after having earned an MBA degree, doing things that you think you might like to do, you might find attractive, and again, connected to what you like to do and what you're good at. What do those people actually do on a day-to-day basis? Does it appeal to you? And then ask them, what in their education do they feel really benefited them? Did they find useful? What could they have done without? This can really help you clarify both your post-MBA goals and what's going to be important to you in a school. Once you have that clearly defined goal, it can be a substantive and meaningful guide in the process of choosing schools. Now let's kind of put the goal on the back burner for the moment. It'd be wonderful if MBA admissions, I'd be out of a job, it'd be wonderful if MBA admissions was simply about choosing the school that best supported your goal and figuring it out, and then you're done. However, of course, it's not just about that. It is a competitive process. The schools are going to evaluate your qualifications, and you need to do so before you actually start submitting your applications and actually as a part of the process of choosing schools. So let's look at the most important elements in MBA applications, many of which you touched on in your responses to my question about the foundation for a strong MBA application. Again, I don't think of these elements so much as foundational as much as being more like building blocks, or perhaps the studs, the framework of a really, really good, solid MBA application. So the first element is academics, intellectual horsepower, and that usually is primarily demonstrated and most easily demonstrated, and not exclusively, by your GMAT/GRE, the GMAT or GRE, and your undergraduate grades. So, it could also be other degrees, and it could be quant skills. That's a very important element, especially if you come from a liberal arts background. We're going to say more about that, how you can improve these elements if they need improving in a minute. Other critical element is work experience, and that has a quantitative and a qualitative element. And increasingly, you're going to find that a multicultural or international element is valued. It's not required, but it certainly is valued in the MBA admissions market. The third element that's going to be very much looked at in your application are your personal qualities, and first and foremost among them will be leadership. If it's location, in real estate, it's leadership in MBA admissions. Other desirable qualities are teamwork, organizational, analytical, and communication skills, resilience, initiative, innovativeness. And I think this also, I don't know a word for this, but I don't know what the quality is of this. Perhaps it's a subset of leadership. It's the fact that you're a contributor, a giver, and a person of impact. Fourth, schools are going to look for fit. Do your values and match the school's values? And you should be looking at that too, by the way. Would you be comfortable at the program? Does the culture, the school's culture, appeal to you? And then when you've gone through your qualifications, you have to say which of the schools that you want to attend and which of those schools are you competitive. If you find that you're not competitive, are you close enough where you can improve your profile to make yourself more competitive? So let's go back through those elements and see what you can do to make them better. And again, I'm talking about in the next 6 months. Though in some cases you may find that there's enough work to do and you really want those particular schools that it would pay to postpone your application a year. In any case, let's take a look at your grades. If you believe that your undergraduate grades are below average, there are things that you can do to compensate. You can take business-related courses at a local university, extension program, or community college and earn A's in them if you have a problematic GPA. Schools will look at those A's, especially if the poor grades as an undergrad were in your freshman, sophomore years. And they'll say, okay, now you're mature, now you're motivated, this is what you can really do. And I'm not saying they will ignore your undergraduate performance, but they will clearly see that you're capable of excelling in an academic environment. They will also consider certificates like the CFA and various CPA, and the actuarial exams, and the ASA, FSA, and various other professional certificates. If your quant skills are weak, if you're the proverbial poet, but your grades are good, you may consider something like MBAmath.com to improve those skills, to show that you're serious about business school, and also because of its flexible schedule. It will really work on the skills you'll need to prepare for business school. Now, there is somebody with weak quant skills. Now, the other element, of course, in showing intellectual readiness for graduate business school is that big, scary GMAT. It can also be the GRE, but the GMAT is generally considered to be the harder exam. So where are you at? I want to hear from you right now where you're at with your GMAT preparation. And again, I'm going to request that Miriam post a poll. And if you could take a minute to indicate where you're at with your GMAT preparation, I would greatly appreciate it. The options are, I did not start any GMAT prep yet. I am currently preparing for my first GMAT. I am satisfied with my GMAT score. I am concerned about my GMAT score. I'm retaking the GMAT. And we're almost at 80%. I'm going to give about another 5 seconds. Please indicate your vote. Okay, Miriam, if you could close the poll. The results are 11%. I did not start any GMAT prep yet. Started. 26%. I'm currently preparing for my first GMAT. Good. 20%. I'm satisfied with my GMAT score. Congrats. That's great. 15%. I'm concerned about my GMAT score. You're in good company. 37%. I'm retaking the GMAT. That's fine. There really is no downside to retaking the GMAT score. If you took it and you were doing better on practice exams, then, or you had a jackhammer going outside the test-taking room, or you had the flu the day of the exam, for some reason you had the proverbial bad day, I would really strongly urge you to retake it. The schools will take the highest score. A few schools will even take the highest sub-score. In other words, they won't look so much at the overall score. They'll take your highest quant out of two test-taking sessions and your highest verbal. So that's really the most favorable way of viewing a score. I I also strongly urge you, if you have not started your GMAT prep yet, or if you're currently preparing for it, that you just give it your all, so that the first test administration is very, very likely to be your last and your best. It's a pain to prepare more than once, and it also distracts you from the other things that you could be doing to improve your application, your admissions chances. Again, it is an important element of the application. As some of you said, it was foundational. I believe it's a very, very important supporting beam in the structure that you're going to be building, and just do the best you can on it. I'm going to take questions at the end. I see that somebody has asked if we take it 3 or 4 times, is it negative? And maybe, Miriam, you could flag that question and we can come back to it at the end, because I think it's a good question. The next important element, as most of you know, is work experience. And some of you are going to be concerned because you have too little, some of you because you have too many. What is too little? For most MBA programs and most applicants, I know there are exceptions, less than 2 years of work experience is too little. I would encourage you to wait a year or aim for schools with lower average ages of matriculation if you have less than 2 years of work experience. The schools about 4 years ago, approximately 5 years ago, seemed even three, seemed to be more encouraging to applicants coming straight from college. They seem to be turning away from admitting and matriculating MBA students straight from college. If you do want to go straight from college, or you have less than 1 year of work experience, then consider an MS in management like that offered by Duke or the London Business School. I think Wake Forest also has one, and there are more and more of those programs. What if you're on the other end of the spectrum and you have too much work experience? What is too much work experience? The sweet spot for schools right now seems to be 4 to 6, 3 to 6 years of work experience. 6 to 8 gets to be above average, but I don't think it's quite in the too much category. If you have 8 or more years of work experience, I think you are in the too much category. And at that point, consider an executive MBA program or the Sloan Fellows programs if you have 10 or more years of work experience, and if you really want a top-notch program and have top-notch experience. If you want to apply to a regular full-time MBA program and you are in this too much category, then be extra clear about why you want an MBA now, given your level of experience and your level of seniority. Show that you are not relying on the school to find you a post-MBA job. You can do so by referencing contacts that you have that will enable you to achieve your dream on your own, or perhaps you already have an offer to return to your current employer or to another employer once you have an MBA. As I mentioned before, an international component to work experience is increasingly valued, particularly by European schools. It's rewarded and valued by U.S. schools. It's not a requirement. On the other hand, if you can add that international component to your job work, to your work and your job, then more power to you. Go for it. All right, let's move on to the personal qualities, elements, what I call pillar of your application. These are probably among the top personal qualities: leadership, teamwork, communications, and analytical skills. So with leadership in bold, well, not bolded on the screen, it can be difficult for people who are fairly junior at work to assume leadership roles. To the extent that you can, or you can ask for additional responsibilities, go for it. Take on responsibilities at work that will allow you to demonstrate these qualities, specifically leadership, managerial, organizational skill, etc. But sometimes it can be hard to do so at work, and it's easier to assume leadership roles in volunteer capacity. And that also allows you to show yourself as a contributor to your community. So consider that. It's an option. It's an option that I think is, again, of increasing importance on the MBA scene. What about community service? What if you haven't done community service since you were in college? My particular view is it's better late than never. If you haven't previously been involved, choose a cause that you identify with, that you feel is important, and offer to chair an event, a fundraiser, a project and in that way, again, show the qualities that business schools value, show that you are a contributor. If you have been active in a community service capacity, just continue what you're doing. Perhaps expand, but there's no need to do something new because you're applying if you've been a giver, a contributor, and a responsible player in some community service capacity. Even, it doesn't even have to be community service, by the way. It could be something like sports or the arts or something along those lines. Okay, so let's step back. We have the elements of a good MBA mission strategy now. You have your goal, and you've researched the schools, and now you need to research the schools that you want to apply to. You have your goal. You've examined and analyzed your strengths and weaknesses. You may even have a plan to improve your profile. So now you have to look at the schools that you want to apply to. What schools are best suited to help you achieve your goals? To determine that, I would look at the specialty rankings provided by Business Week, U.S. News, and Financial Times, but don't stop at the rankings. Move on. Go to the school's websites and look there for how they support specific goals. Look at the career services reports. Look at student blogs, and even try and make contact with current students and recent alumni. Accepted.com has just started a brand new series on MBA career goals and the business schools that support them. We will be continuing this, I believe, over the next several months, and it should really be, I hope, a fantastic resource for people doing exactly this kind of research. And I think Miriam just posted the link to it. So the second thing you're going to want to consider when choosing schools is your educational preferences. Do you really want a heavily experiential program? Do you want a case study school? Do you want a school that provides a mix of methodology? Do you have a preference for East Coast, West Coast, urban, rural, big school, small school? Some of those are educational, some of them are personal. And then finally, you do have just sheer personal preferences. Do you hate cold weather? Tuck may not be the school for you. Do you have a significant other who's going to need to work? Again, you might be better off in a large urban center. So consider all those elements. And when you have those elements lined up, you know what's important to you. You know what schools are likely to accept you. Then you are ready to choose the schools to apply to. If there's a complete and total disconnect between the schools you want to attend and the schools likely to want you, you are not going to be very happy. You will probably end up with a rejection. What you want is to find the intersection, the universe of schools that you want to attend, and the overlap between the schools likely to want you, the schools where you are competitive. That intersection, right where that green arrow is, those schools that fall into that area on my little graph here, those are the schools that you're going to select from and choose where to apply. And you probably are going to want to apply somewhere like 4 to 6 schools. There can be some variation on that number, but that's a pretty good guide. All right, now you have your schools. So what should you be doing? Should you be writing essays? We know that Harvard Business School came out with its essay questions this week. Should you start writing if you're applying to apply to Harvard, if Harvard falls into that center area for you? Should you be applying? Should you be starting to write essays this minute? I don't think so. I think you should, at this point, be jotting down notes and ideas. The only exception would be if you want to apply for Harvard's July deadline for its 2+2 program, and that's a fairly small subset of the applicant pool. I don't know if anybody here today is applying there. For most of you, though, the questions are not out, and especially when the questions are not out, and you have so many other things to do, I would not start writing essays now. But what you can do, and what I think would be very constructive to do, is to just jot down notes and ideas when ideas come to you. You can create a file, or you can use a tool called Evernote. And I think there'll be a blog post with a little bit more detail on this later today. Create a file where you can jot down ideas for topics to include, perhaps where you'll write down notes from informational interviews and thoughts about the schools and possible essay topics. What should you be thinking of? think about what experiences are you most proud of? What do you want the schools to know about you? And when you're writing about it, focus on the following elements. What was the challenge you faced when you had this experience? What did you do? What was the impact of your actions? What was the outcome? And what character traits did you reveal through your actions? These notes can really, really be very helpful when you sit down to write the essays. Again, don't edit them. Don't worry about grammar. Don't make them pretty. This is for you. This is private. It's personal. It's not social. This is for you, and it can save you time when you do sit down to write essays. Once the applications are out, and I know I just said you don't have to start on Harvard yet, and they are out, but I would say that most of the applications are going to come out in July. Some will come out in June. A few will come out in August. If you're aiming for round one deadlines, you probably should start the writing process towards the end of July, maybe the beginning of August, and that will allow you to avoid that kind of 11th hour situation that I had the slide up there earlier, with the clock about to hit midnight. Also be aware that servers sometimes overload as they get close to that deadline, because there are so many stress junkies and type A's among the MBA applicant pool. So what should you be working on now? Is there any written documents that you can really, really knock out of the park now? Yes, there's your resume. This is something you can nail now, and I think you should. Make it clean, make it succinct, focus on the impact you had in whatever positions you list, honors for education, and again, for work experience impact, not just descriptions of your responsibilities, and nail it. The other thing you can do, certainly very soon, especially if you're applying round one, is talk to your recommenders. You want them to say, you're great, but you also want them to back it up with specific examples and meaty anecdotes. Ask your recommenders in the near future, ask them if they are willing to write a supportive letter of recommendation for you. Offer to give them materials that may assist them in the writing process, and also tell them that you'll give them about 4 weeks' notice. And let them know approximate time frame. Probably would be the month of September, because you don't want to find out they're on vacation for the entire month of September when you go to give them the form. I promised you 7 action items from this webinar, and here they come. The first one, it shouldn't surprise any of you, it's hone your goal. Okay? Make sure you have a clear, focused goal, again, in terms of function and industry. Short term, give a little thought to your long term, but I'm talking more the short term goal now. 2, evaluate your qualifications. Determine if there's anything you need to work on. 3, research the schools to determine which ones best support your goals. 4, improve those areas that need improving. Now, if you have a 650 GMAT and you're planning to apply to a school with an average GMAT score of 640, you don't need to retake the GMAT and score a 700. And, if you have a 3.5 GPA and the average GPA at your target program is 3.55, and you also come from a quantitative background, you don't need to start taking courses to prove that you can handle the workload. It's there. So don't try and reinvent the wheel, and focus on those areas that really do need improving. Essay prep. Again, I'm not talking about essay writing. I'm talking about jotting down those notes. And Miriam, I see, posted a little spreadsheet that I prepared, which should help you in terms of organizing the notes. 6, work on your resume. Yes, you can nail that now. That is the one document you can just get out of the way. And 7, decide on and ask your recommenders if they will help you and write a supportive letter of recommendation. Some of you may look at this list and wisely decide to apply round 2 or even next year. That's okay. Others will only have a few action items, so I guess in that case I may have failed to provide 7 action items, but they're there. You can just check them off right away, which should give you tremendous psychological pleasure. But all of you should have something to do. and whatever you do in the next several months will improve your chances of acceptance to the class of 2014. And yes, you've also succeeded in reducing my frustration at those who don't start early enough, and you've also finally enabled me to provide some straight talk about MBA admissions. So I want to thank you for that, and I also want to point out that Accept.com is here to help. We bring enormous admissions experience. I mentioned I've been in this business for 15 years. Collectively, the staff has decades of experience, and we're more than happy to help you both with advising on strategy and tactics, and when you get to the essays, with the polishing and editing of those essays. Finally, I promised 2 special offers. Actually, I promised 1, but we're giving you 2. The first is that we are reopening the birthday ebook sale for participants in this webinar until Sunday, May 15th. This is exclusively for you. It's not advertised on the website or anywhere else. All ebooks are half price for everyone registered for this webinar through this Sunday. Just use coupon code WEB50. The other thing I want to announce is that next week you will receive an invitation for a free consultation. And make sure you receive this invitation, add online support at accepted.com to your friends or priority email list, whatever gets through to you, so that you can get your free consultation. Finally, I want to just highlight a few resources available at accepted.com, and I want to take your questions. And but before I take your questions, I want to ask you to list in the question box, to respond to the question box, and the first response will get a free ebook. What is the one written document that you can and should work on now? Resume. Okay. So you said it first. Flor, you got it. But I see that most of you do have it. Okay. Flor gets the ebook, but I can see we have a lot of people paying attention. You've been a great audience. Let me get to your questions. Okay. Miriam, let's see. Were there any questions that, okay. Venkata asked about the GMAT. If we take it 3 or 4 times, is it negative? It's not negative, except unless the scores don't go up. It's not a great thing, though. So, especially when we get up to 5 times. And I think the admissions committee just kind of was like, you know, at some point, you just have to accept that this is your score. It's not so much that they're going to penalize you for taking it additional times, but if it goes down, or I think it becomes more a question of judgment and perhaps lack of, than an issue like, oh, we're going to penalize him or take points away or think less of him because he tried again and again and again. The law of diminishing returns definitely sets in. Then, and I see your second post, Venkata, and I would just say, okay, that's my score, and I would focus on other areas. You may need to adjust your school choices just to the realities of the situation, but I don't think there's any sense after 5 times in trying again. Let's see, were there some other questions that Miriam marked for me? Miriam, do you want to highlight some questions you think would be good? Or I'll just go through here.
Sure, I've been going through and marking off, a few of the questions that I think will be applicable to a lot of our audience, so should see them.
Okay. Sylvia asked an interesting question. She asks, when you say less than 2 years is too little, do you mean 2 years of work experience at the time of the application or admission? I mean at the time of matriculation. So if you have 1 year of work experience and you're going to work an additional year before you actually start school, the schools will count that as 2 years of work experience. Realize, however, that there is one sense in which it is still only 1 year, and that is in terms of the experiences you can draw on in your essays and your interviews. And in that sense, obviously, you can't talk or write terribly intelligently about things you haven't yet done or haven't yet happened. So in terms of the school's numbering, it's 2 years. In terms of reality, it still is only 1. Floor asks, and this is an excellent question, does community service during undergrad count for something if I have not been able to continue after graduation because of work? It does count, absolutely, but it's not. It also depends on how many years you've been out of college. If you've been out of college 5 years, then the fact that you were active in college is of less importance. Just like anything you did more than 5 years ago is of less importance. If you're young and if you're younger or you're 1 or 2 years out of college and you're applying, what you did in high school is of less importance. So it's not that it doesn't count at all. It just doesn't count that much. And it also would highlight the fact that in the last 5 years, you haven't done any community service. So again, whatever number of years it is, I would say it would be wise for you to get involved with something. And there can be many different avenues. It can be a religious organization. It can be an immigrant society. It can be, your local hospital, soup kitchen, whatever. Anything like that. So choose something that you're passionate about and that you would enjoy doing. Somebody else asks about community service by financial assistance. Does that count for anything? I assume that you mean writing a check. It shows generosity, depending upon how much you contribute and how much you make. It might show generosity. It might not. It does not show leadership. It does not show communication skills. It does not show organizational ability. It doesn't show any of the qualities that the business schools really value, because what they want us to see is participatory contribution. Let's see, some other questions. Sweta asked, I apologize to anybody whose name I mispronounce, is it okay to have only one professional recommendation, the educational recommender? Is it mandatory? Usually for MBA admissions, educational recommendations are discouraged, and professional recommendations are preferred. Sweta also asks, is the professional guidance mandatory to make the application? That probably depends on whom you ask. If you ask me with my marketing hat on, of course it's mandatory. If you ask me when I'm in a more objective mood, I would have to answer that no, it is not mandatory. There are many, many people who get accepted without professional guidance. However, I think the question is, are they getting accepted to the best school? Are they working as efficiently as they could? Are they spending more in time than they have to? I think the professional guidance can save you enormously in terms of time. I think it can also perhaps help you get in, not perhaps, I'm sure that in many cases, users of the professional services, especially accepted.com, get into better schools than they would otherwise. And that's why these services that we are in business. Timothy asks, what if your GMAT is good but your GPA is not so good for the school you want to apply to? It depends how much lower it is. And yes, the GMAT on some level can compensate for a low GPA. This is one of those areas where, a lot of factors will go into account. Was your GPA rising overall? In other words, was it a bad freshman, mediocre sophomore, better junior, and stellar senior year? That would be a fairly typical pattern, and if combined with a really good GMAT and perhaps some of the other elements I talked to, like a professional certification or maybe a recent A or two, then I think it would work well. The details, they'll make an enormous difference. How high is the GMAT and how low is the GPA? What were the circumstances surrounding the GPA? What have you been doing since? So it may or may not, at the risk of being really mealy-mouthed, Timothy, it could be really good, but the details are what count. By the way, I want to mention, if any of you want to post questions to me or to .com staff, you can do so in our forum, forums.accepted.com. You can do so on our Facebook page, or you can obviously do so in the consultations that we're going to have in a couple of weeks. And you can also, if you want more in-depth advice as opposed to just a quick question, obviously we do offer admissions consulting. Okay. Let's see.
You know, Linda, we do have quite a lot of questions.
Yes.
The applicants. So maybe that's an area that we can touch on because a lot of people seem to be asking about that.
What was that about again, Miriam? I didn't catch it.
Reapplicants. People who...
Reapplicants. Okay. Yes, I see now one from Sylvia. She writes, I applied to several top schools in the past year but didn't get accepted. I'm going to apply for 2012. Do you have any advice for reapplicants? Will the chance of admission be higher for reapplicants? Many schools don't give feedback for reapplicants, so I'm wondering how .com can help the reapplicants in general. Thanks. That's a great question. We have a whole page devoted to, with resources, not just one page, one article. We have a lot of resources for reapplicants. Maybe, Miriam, could you post the URL for that? Great, thank you. And you will find another webinar for reapplicants. You'll find articles for reapplicants. We have an ebook for reapplicants. You can get it half price with this coupon code till Sunday. We also have a service where we evaluate one or more of your rejected applications and give you suggestions for how you can improve it. Now, going to the other questions on your list, the chance for an application is higher for reapplicants, particularly if you were invited to interview. It is probably at most schools somewhat higher for reapplicants, provided they show growth and improvement. Submitting the same old, what you submitted last year is not going to result in a different outcome unless there's an enormous drop in MBA applications next year, which I really don't anticipate. So again, you need to evaluate what went wrong. There are three primary reasons for rejection, and the three can be combined. One, you applied to the wrong schools. You simply were not qualified. If you recall, I'll try and go back up to it, that the slide I had with the two circles where they did not intersect, that is what you have when you get rejected. Okay? The schools you want to attend and the schools likely to want you, there was no intersection. So perhaps you chose the schools poorly. I really don't mean to pick on you individually. There was a disconnect there. Or the other possibility is that you really are qualified for the schools in question, but you didn't present yourself well. You didn't present the qualifications well. This webinar has focused very much on an overarching strategy for application. We really have not discussed much at all how to present yourself at your best. Again, there are resources on the website. Bold and Brilliant Essays is one. Essays That Stick is another. These are two other webinars that I did. There are also written articles. There are videos, whatever, that you can look at that will help you in terms of just presenting yourself. The third major reason for rejection is that you're a victim of the numbers. You come from an overcrowded segment in the applicant pool, and competition is particularly stiff, and somehow you just were a victim of the numbers. That is usually, that number three reason is frequently combined with number two, an inadequate presentation of your qualifications. And yes, the fourth possibility is some combination of all three, particularly number two and number three. So what do you do about it? Well, if the primary issue was, as the slide, there's a disconnect between the schools you want to attend and the schools likely to want you, you either have to change the schools you want to attend, or you have to change your profile and make yourself more attractive to those schools so that you end up with a situation like this. Oops, too heavy on the mouse wheel. This is the situation you want, so that the schools you want to attend and the schools you likely to want you, those two universes overlap and intersect. That's one approach. Either you change the schools or you change you. Again, if presentation was the issue, you have to improve your presentation. You have to improve your essays. You have to improve your interview skills. You have to improve your resume, perhaps letters of recommendation. So all those elements. If you're a victim of the numbers, there's not much you can do. Then you may want to adjust your school choices a little bit, perhaps apply to a few more schools. But again, there you just have to reapply and hope for the best. Perhaps adjust the competitiveness of the schools downward a little bit if you feel that was the cause. So those are the options for reapplicants. Any other questions that are coming up again and again and again? And Sylvia, I hope I gave you some suggestions there that you find worthwhile. Let's see, are there any other questions that Miriam has flagged? Okay, here's another interesting question from Shrey. He or she asks, what if we can't get a referral from a supervisor at our organization? It's impossible. What's the alternative? Okay, that's a good question. It's actually a fairly common situation. What you can do is you can go to a previous supervisor, either a supervisor at a workplace where you were previously, or a supervisor at the current workplace who has left your organization. Those would all be acceptable recommenders. Sandy asks, you mentioned about the Venn diagram when selecting the school, and I just showed it again. But how do we identify the portion at the center because our judgment might not be the most accurate or realistic? Well, that would be the advantage of consulting with a consultant, and because the consultant is much more objective and realistic. There's no way to know 100%. And that's also why I typically recommend that you apply to 1 to 2 stretch schools, 3 to 4 competitive schools, and 1 or 2 safety schools. That allows you to apply to a range of programs. And what's a safety, what's a competitive, what's a stretch is somewhat of an art, but you can use a combination of average GPA, average GMAT, average work experience, and the acceptance rate at the given school to determine kind of where you're falling. If you're pretty close to the averages, if you're in that 75% range on the GMAT and GPA, if you're above the average in both GMAT and GPA, you're close to the average on work experience quantitatively. You know that qualitatively your work experience is competitive. Then you are a competitive student. If your stats are well above average and for a school, then it's probably a safety school. I'm not talking about work experience. And if your stats are more than 30 points below and your GPA is also, let's say, 0.2 to 0.3 below the school's average, it is going to be a stretch. Certain schools, simply because the acceptance rate is so low, let's say the acceptance rate is under 15%, you can never consider yourself, almost never, very, very rarely can you consider yourself a shoo-in at any school with that kind of acceptance rate. Let me see some other, here's one. Kanan asks, when Linda says, hone your goal, I am a little confused. For me, I would like to get into sustainability, but I'm not sure if it's going to be marketing strategy, etc. Is this important? Do we need to know the kind of role as an XYZ position at my dream company, Chevron, and then make the case that since Chevron hires for the particular MBA program, state that in the essays? I would say that you would be better off. Sustainability is very broad. You could say sustainability in the energy industry. So you definitely don't have to say I want to work for Chevron. You could say in oil and gas. You could say in the energy industry. And sustainability in that case would be more of a function, and the industry would be the energy industry. So on some level, I think we're almost talking about semantics here, whether it's going to be marketing or strategy, because I think sustainability is in and of itself at this point in time maybe a function that combines strategy and marketing and probably a little bit of finance and numbers and all that kind of stuff. And if you want to be in the energy field, then you have it right there. Kushal asks, does Exhibit.com provide assistance with choosing schools? Yes. as in the ones likely to be a good match after evaluating my profile. Yes, it's exactly what we do. Let me see if we have any other questions.
Linda, we are just about out of time here. We probably have time for about one more question.
All right. Okay, thanks. Gopi asks, between a choice between a conventional short-term goal and an unconventional short-term goal, which one would the AdComs look more favorably? The AdComs would look most favorably at the one most connected to your previous experience because it will make the most sense. Whether it's conventional or unconventional is much less important than whether it stems logically from what you've done previously. With that, I want to thank you. You've been a marvelous audience. I really appreciate your participation, your questions, your answers, and most of all, your time and attention. Good luck with your applications. Please, again, take advantage of the offers that we mentioned a moment ago. And I just wish you the best. If we can be of help, please let us know.
Well, thank you very much, Linda, for this informative webinar, and thank you all for attending. As you leave the webinar, there will be a short survey. Please, if you have a chance, just give us your feedback because we do value it very highly. If you want to review the webinar, it'll be available in about a week or so on the accepted.com website, and we'll also send out an email letting you all know when it's available. As Linda mentioned, don't forget coupon code WEB50, WEB50, 50% off of all of our ebooks through May 15th. And good luck with your 2012 applications.